Well, I'd certainly like to extend a warm welcome to those of you who have been waiting a while for this video. Unfortunately, I had a very unpleasant encounter with a pathogen known as the SARS-CoV-2. Yeah, I had COVID-19. So basically, I had to put this video on hold until my body was able to vanquish this evil pathogen. So here I am again, ready to do part 2 of this video about using a professional mixer. So without any further preamble, let's dive right in. If you're watching this series of videos for the first time and you haven't seen part 1, I'm going to encourage you to go back and watch part 1, especially if you haven't used a mixer before and you'd like to understand the basics of doing the connections and getting your mixer ready. So in this part 2 of this series of videos, I'm going to talk about podcasts. And podcasts are very popular. You have different professionals, different people who use podcasts on their, whether it's a social media platform or some other source of information, to basically produce quality documentaries, so to speak. Some do it on a regular basis. I know like some attorneys, they have regular podcasts where they answer questions and they give a brief presentation to the public, and it serves as a means of educating your public and keeping them informed as to what is happening in their respective fields of endeavor. So podcasts are very useful. And let's face it, not everyone is willing to learn all the things associated with operating the equipment for a podcast. Most professionals would just rather focus on talking about the subject that they're an expert in. So for those of you who are think of acquiring a podcast, this could be a nice little gig, having your mixer and your microphone, and basically you just spend time traveling around town setting up the equipment for podcasts for different people. It's a nice way to make an income, especially if you're good at what you're doing. So we're going to pick up from where we left off in the first video. In the first video, we used our condenser mic, which uses phantom power. And one of the things I did on purpose, I actually allowed you to hear in the first video, and also in this one you're hearing, that this microphone, the sensitive condenser microphone, is picking up all the background noise. So one of the things you'll have to decide when you're choosing the types of microphones that you're going to use, do I need a very sensitive condenser microphone, or do I want my standard cardioid microphone, which doesn't require phantom power? And if you have no idea what phantom power is, then you need to go back and watch video number 1. The sensitive condenser microphones, they have their uses. So I'm not knocking it. I think they're best used in a studio environment or a controlled environment where you have everything closed off. There's carpeting and there's a less chance of the room generating a lot of background noise. So I think these are ideal for that, and especially in a studio setting where you're going to be doing some singing or some other performance in a closed setting. This condenser microphone comes in very handy. Or if you're the host and basically you're going to be sitting at the desk most of the time and you're going to be interviewing people and guests are going to be coming and going, then this might be a very good option for you. You can keep it close to your mouth, and then you don't have to speak very loudly. You can speak very softly, and the microphone will pick up exactly what you're saying. For the guests who are coming and going, this type of microphone, the cardioid, might be a better solution, because being guests, it gives you a lot more flexibility as to controlling the volume, the gain for whoever is speaking, the loudness, and it's a better option overall. It's very directional, so someone would have to speak directly into the microphone, and it's more forgiving. It's not as sensitive as the condenser microphone, but it's a bit more forgiving. So for your audience microphones, for the microphones that you're going to be using for guests, the cardioid might be the best option. Usually it's the best option. And then for you as the host, you might want to use a condenser microphone for the reasons that I mentioned before. So let's do a bit of a deep dive right now into how you'd want to use your professional mixer in a podcast setting. If you're recording, then obviously you'd have time to edit your videos before you put them out on a social media platform so that the public can view and benefit from that video. So if you're recording, then there's a lot of flexibility that you have as far as using your microphone or your mixer in a podcast. You could control your own mixer. You can control your gain here. And you can do many other things. Yes, so as I was saying, you would have to decide whether you want to manipulate the mixer on your own or whether you'd like to use someone else to do that for you. If you're someone who does podcasts on a regular basis and you're going to have studio guests, then it would behoove you to learn how to discreetly control those sliders so that you can modify the sound coming in from those microphones as your guests come on and off the microphones. Strictly speaking, if you have a camera, it's no longer a podcast. It's basically a live streaming event, or it could be a recorded event. But then once you get cameras involved, then the equation changes. So you want to think carefully. Am I going to be using cameras? Who's going to be controlling those cameras? And will the cameras be pointed at my mixer board? And as you evaluate the situation, you may decide that, you know what, in this podcast, there are going to be cameras, or it might be a live event. I don't want to dedicate my time controlling a mixer. So it might be in your best interest to hire someone else to do that. And of course, if you're watching this video, then chances are you are thinking of getting a mixer and, teaming up with persons operating a camera to provide that service to individuals who want to do podcasts or live streaming events. I'm not going to spend much time diving into that aspect. Working a mixer along with cameras, recording different angles of an event, that's a whole different ball game. And if you guys would like me to do a video about that, then certainly let me know in the comments below. But today we want to focus on using the mixer in a podcast setting, especially a live event where you have several people who are going to be intervening in that discussion, hosted by whoever is in control of that program or in control of that social media channel. So here's what we're going to do. Let me bring the volume up on this. Well, before I bring the volume up on this cardioid microphone, let's do something that I did in the first video, but it didn't work that well. And I think I figured out why it may not have worked that well in the first video. So in the first video, we spoke about balance, left and right channels. So as you can see, I'm going to take this down and I'm going to pull it over to the left. So the emphasis is going to be on the left. And in my headset, I can hear most of my voice coming through the left earpiece. When I did it in the first video, I did not get that clear definition of it appearing on my left side. And I think that may be due to the fact that I was using a USB connection and the driver probably wasn't set up properly. On this occasion, I'm using a 1/4 inch. So I have 2 1/4 inch plugs, left and right. And then the other tip of that cable is a 3.5 millimeter stereo connection, or a 1/8 inch connector. And that I've plugged into the line in connection on the back of the computer. So usually on the back of your desktop computer, you have 3 connections or 3 audio ports at the back. You have the pink, which is usually for a microphone. You have green, which is usually for your audio out, your speakers or your headphones. And then you have the blue, which is your line in. So I've connected this cable to the line in. And so in my software that I'm using to record this video, I'm using the line in. So the output from the mixer is going to the line in. And the connection that I'm using on the back of the mixer to go into that line in is the control room. So basically on the back of this mixer, the control room, basically in a studio setting, if you have a room where you have like your producer and everyone listening into what is happening, the line out from the control room would go to that room and connect to their speakers so that they can hear everything that's happening in the recording. And then of course the main out, that would go to your speakers that the audience would hear. Now, under what conditions would I want to put my balance all the way to the left or to the right? So let's say that in doing my podcast, I'm seated in a line. I'm on the extreme left, and then I have my guests 2, 3, and 4 going all the way over to the right. So if I'm on the left, I may want to turn my balance a little bit to the left so that when I speak, if there's a live audience, for example, they can hear the sound coming from the left side, the left speaker, most of the sound. And then if I have a guest who's on the extreme right side, then what I might do is I might take this volume control and move it over to the right. So let's move this volume up and turn my main microphone down. Push this aside. So like I said, if I have a guest who's on the extreme right of the screen, whenever they speak, because the emphasis is on that side, and right away your brain automatically turns your attention to where the majority of the sound is coming from. For you at home watching this video, when I said left, you probably heard the sound through your right headpiece or your right speaker. And when I said right, you probably heard the sound through your left earpiece or left speaker. Why is that? Because the software that is recording the video takes into consideration that if you're watching this video, then you're facing me. And if you're facing me, then it means that my left would be your right and my right would be your left. So it has to switch it around to compensate for that fact that you're looking at the screen. And of course, if I were in a live studio audience, basically the same thing would happen. My left speaker would be on the right side of the audience. So it would still follow. Wherever the guests are seated and speaking from, then that's where they would hear the majority of the sound coming from. So those are some of the things you want to take into consideration when you're doing a podcast. So that's basically it for this aspect of using the mixer in a podcast setting. The major takeaways: 1, am I going to be controlling the mixer myself, or do I really want to hire someone to do that? Usually if you're by yourself and you're doing a recording, it's easy to control the mixer on your own. If you're doing a live podcast with no cameras, then again, it's easy to control the mixer by yourself because there's no camera pointed at you to see you doing and manipulating stuff and making any errors. And of course, if you make a mistake, you could always pause and apologize and then continue. Now, when you have different guests coming in, whether they're on the recording or the live stream or the podcast all at once, or they're going to be coming and going, it becomes a bit more challenging. And for some persons that might not be a problem, but for others it might definitely be a problem. And so you may want to hire someone to do that for you to control the mixer. And of course, we also talked about persons who might want to get a mixer like this one. And then basically your gig would be just traveling around town and setting up audio equipment for podcasts so that, people can live stream without having any need to acquire that technical knowledge of using a mixer. So based on how the market is positioned right now, having a professional mixer like this one, which is relatively inexpensive, having some decent microphones and basic lighting and maybe one or two webcams and your laptop, that's all you need to help customers do a podcast. And it's a decent way of making a living. So this is where we're going to end for now. And then in our third video, we're going to expand on this matter of a podcast and start using multiple microphones in a more complex setting. So thanks for joining me, and I'll see you in the next video.